All right. Thank you guys for coming to our week 6 general meeting. So this picture I actually got, this is from, I don't know where, but this is in Rochester. And I kind of picked it because it had that typical skyline that you hear about, like all the pollutants in the air. And I picked that because the article I picked came from the University of Sydney, so it's not necessarily like right in our backyard. But this was talking about how government regulations and businesses themselves are requiring businesses to assess and disclose their vulnerability to the physical effects of climate change. So looking at how their assets are going to be at risk in the future due to climate change. This article was mostly talking about how misuse of that information is going to endanger businesses. So this study was basically suggesting that we should have a more, they were actually describing like a weather forecast of climate change. They were saying that we should have a much more robust understanding of how climate change will have drastic effects in more recent years. I thought this was really cool just because we kind of talk about like where environmental action is going to come from. We talk a lot about government being a main proponent of environmental action, but I think a lot of it will have to eventually come from businesses. And I just thought this was really interesting, an example of businesses are kind of now forced to take initiative on these things, not just for like greenwashing, not just to look good to consumers, but for actual threats to their businesses. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, we have a couple announcements. First thing I want to talk about elections for next semester. So nominations are open. I want to just put the timeline of this up here. This week, nominations are open. Next week, we will, 1 week from today, next Tuesday, we will be sending out those nominations to the nominees and wait for them to reply back to us to accept or decline. And then week 8, we are going to have presentations from those people and voting will open. And then the week after that, we will have our results. So it's going to go quicker than you think. We might have to repeat that as needed because members who are already within an e-board position are allowed to run for a different position. So we might have to fill in the gaps as needed. So yeah, be aware of that. The nominations form is going to be in Slack right after this meeting is done. So full members can nominate people and full members only can be nominated. So we are going to be checking that. So if you want to nominate someone and you aren't a full member right now, that should, if you sneak in real quick and fill out that form and go on campus groups and pay for dues, then you can do that. The positions that are open, quite a few of them present. I will be graduating. Basically e-board management and the goals and the vision of the group. Vice president does project management. Treasurer focuses on budget and membership, and event coordinator will have 1 position open. That's for event development and planning. So our constitution is posted on the website, but if you have any questions about any of these positions, just ask. Okay, I think that's all I had. Eli, do you want to briefly mention the snowshoeing, what our updates are with that? I believe Eli is having technical difficulties. No, I see a chat. My problems. Okay. If you want to put it in the chat and I'm going to keep going, that's fine. Okay. All right. I think that is all from us. And now we have a presentation. So yeah, thank you so much to Catherine's mom, who is here to talk to us a bit about recruitment. So I am gonna stop talking, and I'm gonna stop sharing as well.
Okay. So my name is Amy Page. Okay, sorry.
Oh no, I'm working on it. Sheesh.
No, I said not to put that up.
You said not to put that up?
So these are
Okay.
my notes.
All right.
These are my notes to keep me
Apparently
on track.
I'm not listening.
Okay. So again, Amy Page. I'm a senior talent acquisition specialist at National Grid. If you haven't heard of National Grid, we are a utility company that provide gas, natural gas, electricity, solar, and wind power to both residences and businesses in upstate New York, downstate New York, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. And our coverage map is a little spotty, and that has to do with a whole other thing about regulating and so that there isn't a monopoly. At any rate, our goal in terms of sustainability for the whole company is to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. And one of our divisions is National Grid Ventures. They are headquartered in Minnesota, which is a long way away, but energy moves through different conduits to different parts of the country and also internationally. So we have this other business, National Grid Ventures in Minnesota. They actually have two summer interns positions that are still open for summer 2021, if anybody is interested in going out to Michigan. I'm sorry, Minnesota. I wanted to share a little bit about our process, which I think is somewhat similar to other companies right now. And that is in terms of interviewing, we are doing, as a first step interview, a phone interview, and then successful candidates from the phone interview piece move forward and they have a 1-hour video interview with hiring manager and usually 2 to 3 people from their team. We are very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as part of that, all of our interviews, the final interviews are all with a diverse panel. All right, so that is our process. I gotta think it's pretty similar at this point to other businesses, other companies, because nobody is really doing on-site interviewing at this time. So because there's all this virtual interviewing, we've been doing this for about a year now, but a lot of people, candidates in particular, have questions. So I thought I'd give just some tips to kind of help you prepare, what to do during the interview, and then the follow-up. So I think one of the most important things that you can do is test your equipment. I mean, we're all on Zoom right now, or are we on Zoom? I think
Yeah,
so. It looks like Zoom. We're all on Zoom right now, but different companies use different video technology. So you want to make sure that you can access that. Sometimes, so we use Teams, Microsoft Teams, and I generally ask the candidate, have you used Teams before? If they haven't, I walk them through. It's very easy, just click on a link. But if they are concerned about their connectivity, then I'll send them a link and set up a private meeting, just the two of us, to make sure that it can work. so that part is really important, and you want to make sure that you're using your laptop and not on a cell phone, or I guess an iPad would probably work, but anything that you have to hold or that has a small screen, you're going to miss things. It's going to be jittery and disorienting for the people that are talking with you. Um, and because it's a video interview, you want to make sure that you are, dressed professionally. Obviously, people aren't probably going to look at your whole body, so you just need to make sure, you can be wearing your bunny slippers and PJ bottoms, but you need to be wearing, like a button down, or something that makes you look professional. You also need to make sure that your space, and it looks like everybody has good space here, but you need to make sure that your space is, it's clean, it's quiet, um, it's just a neat area that doesn't have a lot of distractions behind you, again, to kind of make sure that the focus is on you and what you're saying. um, Make sure you turn off your phone. I mean, that goes for every single interview that you have, whether it's in an office, on the phone, or a video interview. You've got to make sure your cell phone's turned off. And then a lot of this stuff, I think you're probably already aware of. You want to do some research into the company, find out what they do, what their growth looks like, what kind of positions they have, what position that you're being considered for. You want to look at that job description, and you can take that job description and kind of pull it apart and say, oh, I've done this, or oh, I've done that. And then remind yourself in just a couple of words on that description, print it out, and then say, oh, I did this when I had a summer job here, or I did this in this class, so that you can, when they talk to you and ask you questions about your experience, you can line that up. Oh yeah, I did that. And that, you want to do it in a way that's not boastful, but it lets them know that you have this experience, and it'll make them feel more comfortable about your joining their team. You also want to make a list of all of your questions, um, about the company, about the position, but stay away from any questions about compensation or benefits. Compensation is salary or wage. You want to make sure that you don't ask questions about benefits, vacation time, or even career growth. If they ask you, where do you want to be in a certain amount of time, in 5 years, whatever, then you can certainly answer that. But you don't want to make it look like, okay, this job is a foot in the door, and I'm going to stay in that position for as little time as possible, and then I'm going to move on. You want to show them that you're really committed to this job, and that you're interested, and that you're going to learn a lot. And then I recommend that you practice. So there are a bunch of different lists of interview questions that you can find on the internet. I recommend that you pick some of those and practice. Yeah, I mean, with a family member or a friend, you may not be asked those specific questions, but it kind of gets you thinking about how you'd answer difficult questions. So I just think that that's a really good way to handle that. During the interview, so if I send out a Teams invitation, it goes to the candidate and then all the people who are on that interview team. So the candidates have the names of the people that they're going to be interviewing with. I also send the candidate the names and the titles separately, a separate email. And I think that you can do this research yourself. So if you see that Susan Smith and Robert Jones are on this interview invitation, and your recruiter doesn't send you that information, you can hop on LinkedIn, you can check out their profile, and you can see what their current title is. So you have an idea of the organization and where you might fall into it, right? Because I think that's really important. You want to make sure that when you're in one of these calls that you're actually looking at the camera, which is hard. I'm having a hard time doing it right now. So, but look at the camera and not like at the face, or what's happening behind behind you. And this, again, not a good example, but you
Don't have a buddy.
don't sit here on a couch with your cat and your kid. Sit up straight, smile, right? And to show your enthusiasm, you want to kind of lean forward a little bit and say, "Oh yeah, that was, great." Don't be too casual, but don't be afraid to show that you're excited about the opportunity. The other thing, and this is kind of corny, but this is a real secret that not a lot of people know, and that is that 55% of communication is visual. So basically what that means is that the minute people see you, they make a decision about you. And so to overcome that or to work with it, you need to develop a rapport with them. And one way to do that is by pacing your speech to theirs. So you got to do this. It has to be sort of subtle. If the person that's interviewing you or asking you a question is saying, "So tell me about your experience," and they speak really slowly, you don't want to speak the same exact, but you want to have kind of like the same flow. That, if somebody is a slow talker, you don't want to talk quickly. If they're a fast talker, you don't want to talk slowly, because it makes them feel uncomfortable and like they're either racing to catch up or wondering why you're not speaking faster, why you're not clearer. Another thing, which I just did, is try to limit the number of times you say which is really hard, really hard. And then at the end of the interview, make sure that you express interest in the position. This job sounds really great. I think I could make a strong contribution because of my background, but at the same time, as an intern, it would be a really great learning experience for me. What's the next step? And so then they'll tell you, well, I have to talk to the manager, or we have to get back to the recruiter, wherever. They should be able to tell you, you've got another 3 interviews ahead of you. Or my place, it's after you talk to me, you just talk to the hiring manager and we make a decision. But not all companies are like that. Sometimes you have to go through several rounds of interviews. So it's just nice to know what to expect. These so your first positions, or I think well, Sarah, you said you're graduating, so you'll be doing real life interviewing as opposed to a co-op or an internship. So there's a variance about when you would start and what their process will look like a little bit. But National Grid has a summer grid turn program in Waltham, and then they have a graduate development program, which is for folks who have graduated from college. And then they have a leadership development program, which is for candidates who have already earned their masters. So, but all of those start the application process in September. So just to let you know about that. After the interview, so you want to be gracious, thank them for their time. I skipped something, so I apologize. At the beginning of the interview, you need to try to get their full name. If the recruiter didn't send it, you go on LinkedIn. After the interview ends, you want to try to connect to that hiring manager on LinkedIn, because you need to send an individualized thank you note to everybody you met. So if there were 3 people on the interview panel, you need to send one to each of the 3 of them. Frequently people send one bulk one and they put everybody's name on it. That is not cool. You want to be able to send a slightly different thank you note to every single person. And it's not because you're not having those face-to-face meetings and getting people's business cards. You need to have a way to send those thank you notes. So you can generally send them back to the recruiter, or you can send them through LinkedIn. So after your interview, you can send a connection request through LinkedIn, get connected to that hiring manager or the folks on the panel, and then you can write your thank you notes and send them that way. Or you can pass them through the recruiter, either way, but have to send thank you notes. And there's nothing worse than getting a thank you note and finding that there are typos or grammatical errors in them. So you want to make sure that you proofread your work. If you're sending it through LinkedIn, do it in Word or another word processing system, and then you can, copy and paste and put it into your LinkedIn, what do you call that? Mailbox, message box. But my suggestion is always, and Catherine knows this, is to read what you've written out loud. So because your eye will play tricks on you. If you've made a typo, sometimes you'll read it over and over and it doesn't register. But when you stand there and you force yourself to read every single word, then you'll pick up on some of those typos and grammatical mistakes. As you're writing these thank you notes, you want to try to circle back to something that came up in the interview, either something that one of the hiring managers said or something that you said. Your thank you note is really an opportunity to kind of remind them who you are, because they're meeting several, maybe, we would hope that they would only be interviewing 5 people or so, but you never can tell how many people they're interviewing. So you want to make sure that you stand out. So if there was a comment, I'll use you. So when Catherine was having an interview for the company that she's now in a co-op with, on her wall, she has some classic Mustang tin posters. They're like posters. What are those things called?
It doesn't matter.
My point is that when she went back and was writing her thank you notes, because one of her interviewers said, "Oh, you like cars. I have this kind of car," so there was a little aside about that. So she put that in her thank you note. So she just said, it was nice to meet someone else who, is a Mustang lover or something like that. So you just want to help them remember who it was that they saw and what made them kind of stand out. It also gives you an opportunity to correct something. So if you made a mistake when you were interviewing, this does unfortunately happen. If you forgot that you had experience doing something, you can revisit that and say, during our call, after the interview, I realized that I neglected to mention that I'd done this, and it sort of, puts a little Band-Aid on it. One thing that I do is I save all of the thank you notes that I write when I'm applying for a job. I save them in a file, and that way on my computer, and that way if I'm at a loss for words, I can mix and match. I can cut them up as appropriate. So I would suggest doing that. And that's all I have. I'll send out these notes, which are very lackluster, but I'll send out these notes, and there's also a link in the notes to a Harvard Business Review article that talks about video interviewing. most of everything that I said here was really, it's applicable to both video and in-person or phone interviewing. It's all the same thing. So it's about making a connection, and building rapport, and ask for the job. If you're interested, ask for it. That's it.
Awesome, thank you. I had a question. I have a couple questions actually.
Don't worry.
I'm thinking about at least for us as students. I know both of my co-ops I got from our in-person career fair. So it's a really different ballgame when you're talking about online applications. Do you have any suggestions on how to make, before you've even made it to the interview process, on how to make an online application stand out?
It's hard because the whole point of the online application is to not have it stand out. People create, I mean, I saw a resume today that was really impressive, but in the United States, you can't put your picture on a resume. That's, that we have employment laws that prohibit making decisions about people based on their age, on their gender, and their race and religion. And so putting your face on there and then telling us that you're married and that you have 3 kids, it's like, so that's why those systems kind of just import the data, and then they give you a chance to attach a cover letter and a resume. And so I mean, there are people who every time they apply for a job, they take that job description and then they tweak their resume to actually kind of reiterate what the job description says. I wash bottles, the job description says we're looking for a bottle washer. So I've washed 50 bottles an hour at, it's like to show that there's an obvious matchup, because a lot of times you'll go through a recruiter or somebody who's doing a pre-screen that doesn't even really understand the job. So you want to make it as obvious as possible.
And something
Yeah,
you always
I don't
tell
know.
me is take advantage of writing the cover letters. So even though it's an extra step, it can make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Some companies are religious about reading cover letters, and others I've worked for haven't. There's no emphasis on them at all, but on the chance that someone is going to read it, you want to make sure that you attach it. That's another thing about saving all this stuff. I mean, maybe this is just silliness. Everybody knows this, but if you've got a file and you see a job and it's going to be similar to another job that you've already put a cover letter in for, then you can just sort of, as I said, you can cut and paste and create a new one very quickly. Just have to make really certain that you have not put in the other company's name into your cover letter, which has happened before. Not to me, but I've seen it.
So I thought this was interesting. Something that happened in one of my past interviews was I remember, because the hiring manager told me this afterwards. He asked me about specific terms. I think it was, at the time, I think it was like lean manufacturing. And he said, do you know what lean manufacturing was? And I was very honest about it. And I said, no, I don't know what that means. I'm curious and he told me afterwards that someone else who didn't get it because they tried to kind of worm their way around answering it and say what they thought it might be. And I'm just curious, what is a good tactic if you don't necessarily know, even if it's not so direct, but if they are asking you about something that you don't know about?
I think you can ask a question to see if you can get more clarification. Do you that's a tactic. You can't use it too many times in an interview, but you can repeat the question and then you can try to rephrase it. you know, and say, how many bottles have I washed? That's an interesting question. Do you mean how many bottles have I washed a day? You know, have I ever worked on a team that was involved in a sustainability initiative? Not professionally, but through my work at, you know, I mean, you can do that. And, but yeah, you should never try to fake it. You can, you can kind of share what what might be relevant, but you can't say, oh yeah, I've done that, because you'll be found out like that other person was.
I also wanted to ask, in general, what are some of the most notable, the best things you've seen in an interview, and what are some of the worst things you've seen in an interview?
Okay, so worst thing that I saw in an interview this week, because there are a lot of bad interviewers out there, but you know, this week, so my focus is on hiring engineers for the gas business. And so I was having a phone interview with this candidate, and the position he had applied for was a senior analyst um, for it's a systems position. It rolls up into the gas business, so I have to work on it. At any rate, but that's not my cup of tea. And so the question is, you know, why are you looking for a new position? And he said, well, I was on your website because, you know, I have my engineering degree, but I've never really worked in engineering. So I was looking for an engineering position. And then I saw this position and I thought, well, it's close to what I'm doing now. Maybe that would be it. Really? You have to be excited about the job that you're applying for. You don't say, well, this would be my second choice, because that automatically made you our last choice. Right. So so express interest in the job at hand. Don't, and don't try to be a know-it-all. So best interview, you know, just a bunch of people who really are excited about the position, who ask good questions, but not too many. Um, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Um, the best thank you note I ever read, though, I can tell you, he used a line that I thought was really impressive. And he said, you're right.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be loud.
So he said something about the company, the secret sauce, which of course the secret sauce is McDonald's, right? But the way he used it in that phrase, it just like it bowled everybody over. It was just so thoughtful. You know, you're saying this is why you're so good, because, you know, and I want to be a part of that. So I don't know, that probably didn't really answer your question, but
No, it definitely did. You kind of made me think a bit about my own job search, because I am kind of going in an interesting path. I'm not necessarily applying to engineering positions, and I'm trying to apply for more sustainability positions, period.
mhm.
So I'm kind of wondering, how should I how should I kind of present myself for a position that where my resume and the position don't necessarily line up 100%?
It's interesting. Studies have shown, and only 3 women, including Catherine, that men will apply for a job when they only meet like, you know, a third of the requirements, whereas women only apply for jobs where they meet like 95% of the requirements. I would say that your best strategy for a start would be to look for companies that have a strong emphasis on sustainability. So that would be the first thing, because sustainability companies, so here's, National Grid, utility company, right? They have this big push to be net zero by 2050. So they're absolutely hiring, engineers who have that kind of an interest and background. So, I don't know that energy sustainability is of interest, but if you're interested in moving to Minnesota, couldn't be that much colder than Rochester, right? So, I think you just have to phrase things on your resume to explain or to illustrate your interest in sustainability, and that also goes for your cover letter.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions? I am out of mine.
That's a good question.
I go. What would you say are good questions that you should ask the interviewer at the end of the interview?
There are tons of them on the internet. I can send you lists. People ask me frequently, how do you like working here? To get sort of a different flavor. Recently, I've been asked to talk about employee resource groups and diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring initiatives. What. So those are just some of the things. Again, you should absolutely stay away from benefits and compensation, paid time off, career growth. Our job descriptions at the bottom, they all say that this position is part of on a career path. So when somebody says, if you see that in a job posting, you can certainly go back and say, I saw that this is part of a career path. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the expectations would be to grow my career here?
Gotcha. Thank you.
I saw a question once online I saw, which was along the lines of tell me about like a really great employee that you've had under you and like what made them really great. I thought that was kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, that's good.
I think I got my mic working. Did I?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay, yeah, I come here right from my job, so it's like I don't have a lot of time to get things ready. But I have a couple of questions. The first was, what kind of like engineers is your company specifically looking for?
We hire several different types of engineers, mechanical, electrical, and civil. So the engineers that I work with are generally mechanical and civil because they're involved in construction and maintenance of gas facilities, pipelines, and stations. But on the electric side of the business, they're always looking for electrical engineers.
Yeah, my second question was, like if I've applied to a company and then I haven't heard any response from them, and I mean, this is like an actual thing, like I applied to a company and then it's like if we don't reply in 2 weeks, we're not we're not accepting your application right now or something. So in those kinds of cases, like, is there a good way to apply again, or should I try applying for like a different position?
Don't apply to the same position twice, but you can apply to a different position. What I would caution against is applying for, and honest to God, I see this, 25 jobs. Because when I go into the applicant tracking system to look at your application and your resume, one of the features of our ATS is that it shows all of the jobs that you've applied for forever. And sometimes there are people in there who you like, the jobs are all radically different. So what is it that you want to do? Because you've applied to 20 jobs of the past year. You need to focus on jobs that you're a fit for and that interests you, as opposed to, applying for just anything to get your name out there.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, if nobody has any other questions, then thank you so much for coming to present. This was really helpful.
You're welcome.
I know a lot of us are looking for co-ops, and it just gets that little extra bit harder online only. So yeah, thank you so much.
Great. You're welcome. So we're going to send you my my crummy notes. And as I said, there's a link to the Harvard Business Review or Harvard Business School thing about virtual interviewing. And if you're interested, I can send you a bunch of lists of questions that that you can ask, or ways to prepare for questions that you may be asked. Particularly, and I know that the co-op office works with you guys on this, but the elevator pitch, right? Yeah. So so I can send those through to, from Catherine. She can pass them on to you. I wish you all the best of luck in this this semester and in moving forward professionally.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. All right, I'm gonna go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll compile all that information and get it sent out on the CHAP RIT channel on Slack, so that you guys can go back and reference.
Awesome. Yeah, and everyone don't forget, I'm going to send out in approximately 2 minutes the eBoard nominations form. So yeah, please take a look at that. All right. Have a good night, everybody.